Hello, friends, and welcome. Halloween is a time of year where both children and adults dress up, go out, and have a great time. However, in these following stories, horror struck these families on this magical holiday. The content in today's episode is not suitable for all viewers due to frightening situations, emotional and/or physical abuse, and death. Viewer discretion is advised. Timothy Mark O'Brien was born on April 5, 1966 in Deer Park, Texas, to Ronald and Danine O'Brien. On a drizzly Halloween night in 1974, the O'Brien family ate dinner at a friend's house in Pasadena, Texas, before adventuring in the neighborhood for candy. Ronald, who was an optician, was still in his white lab coat during the dinner and when they went trick-or-treating. Ronald O'Brien and his friend Jim Bates took 8-year-old Timothy, his 5-year-old sister Elizabeth, and Jim's son Mark trick-or-treating. Jim's wife Jean, 5-year-old daughter Kim, and Danine O'Brien stayed at the house to hand out candy to trick-or-treaters. After some time going door to door, they wound up at a house with its lights off. The kids rang the doorbell, but no one answered. They moved on quickly with Jim following them. However, Ronald stayed behind. After a few moments, Ronald ran up to catch with the group while waving 5 21-inch giant pixie stick straws for the children. He told the kids it was their lucky day because rich neighbors were distributing expensive treats. Ronald gave 1 pixie sticks to the 3 children, 1 to a 10-year-old boy he recognized from church as they walked home, and the last one to 5-year-old Kim. After the O'Briens got home, Ronald told his 2 children they could have a piece of candy before bed. Timothy chose the pixie sticks, but needed his dad's help to dislodge the sugar that was stuck in the straw. After he took his first mouthful, he told his dad that it tasted bitter. Ronald grabbed a glass of Kool-Aid for Timothy to rinse away the taste. Moments later, Timothy was crying on the floor and died less than an hour on the way to the hospital. Ronald said, "It seemed like it wasn't long before he was up and complaining his stomach hurt and he didn't feel good. He bent over vomiting, and I was holding him and he went limp. We thought we were so careful. We had even wondered if we should go out trick-or-treating this year. There isn't going to be any more trick-or-treating for us." After Timothy's death, the police opened an investigation while there was widespread panic in the neighborhood. Timothy's autopsy revealed that he died from cyanide poisoning. 4 out of the 5 pixie sticks were recovered while the parents of the 10-year-old boy from church panicked when they couldn't find it. They discovered their son sleeping with it in his hand since he wasn't strong enough to remove the staples and eat the candy. The first 2 inches of the 5 pixie sticks were packed with fatal doses of cyanide. Timothy's pixie stick had enough to kill 2 adults, and the other pixie sticks had enough to kill 3 or 4 adults. Ronald was trying to locate the house he said he received the pixie sticks from. He told police that he didn't see a face, just a hairy arm from the unidentified man that gave him the candy. After a few days walking around with police, Ronald found the house. No one was home at the time, but police identified the homeowner as Courtney Melvin, an air traffic controller, and arrested him at work. He was soon ruled out as a suspect when over 200 witnesses confirmed he was at work on Halloween night until 11 p.m. Police then focused on Ronald and found that he was over $100,000 in debt and had an unstable job history. In the last 10 years, Ronald had 21 jobs. At the time of his arrest, he was suspected of theft at his optician job and close to being fired. The family home was foreclosed on, Ronald defaulted on several bank loans, and his car was about to be repossessed. Police discovered Ronald took a $10,000 life insurance policy on each of his children in January 1974 and an additional policy of $20,000 on each child against the insurance company's recommendations and 1 month before Timothy's death. There was a total of $60,000 between the insurance policies on his children. Daneen claimed she had no idea Ronald took out these insurance policies on their children. While investigating, police learned that Ronald called the insurance company to inquire about collecting on Timothy's policies the morning after his death, and he visited a chemical supply store in Houston inquiring to buy cyanide shortly before Halloween, but left when he was told that 5 pounds was the minimum to purchase. Police speculated that Ronald gave the poison pixie sticks to other children to help rule him out as a suspect. Ronald maintained his innocence throughout police questioning. Ronald was arrested on November 5, 1974, for Timothy's murder despite police never discovering where or when Ronald obtained the poison. He was indicted on 1 count of capital murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. He entered a not guilty plea on all 5 counts. His trial began on May 5, 1975 in Houston. During his trial, several witnesses testified against Ronald, including a chemist he was acquainted with, that Ronald asked him in summer of 1973 how much cyanide would be fatal. A chemical supply salesman who Ronald asked how to purchase cyanide. Friends and coworkers claiming Ronald showed an unusual interest in cyanide months before Timothy's death and discussed how much it would take to kill a person. Ronald's sister-in-law and brother-in-law stated Ronald talked about using Timothy's insurance money on a long vacation and buying other items at Timothy's funeral. His wife said Ronald forced Timothy to choose the pixie sticks instead of Timothy choosing it for himself. Ronald continued to maintain his innocence while his defense focused on someone handing out poison candy. Ronald became known as the Candyman and the man who killed Halloween by the press as his case became national news. On June 3, 1975, the jury took 46 minutes to find Ronald guilty of capital murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. It took 71 minutes to sentence him to death by electrocution. Shortly after he was convicted, Daneen filed for divorce. Since the state of Texas adopted lethal injection as means of execution in 1977, Ronald's death sentence was changed from electrocution to lethal injection. Ronald's first execution date was set for August 8, 1980, but his attorney successfully petitioned for a stay of execution. A second date was scheduled for May 25, 1982, but was also postponed. His third execution date was scheduled for October 31, 1982, and on the 8th anniversary of Timothy's death. However, the Supreme Court delayed the date again to give Ronald a chance to pursue an appeal for a new trial. A fourth execution date was scheduled for March 31, 1984. His attorney fought for another stay on the basis of cruel and unusual punishment, but a federal judge rejected the request on March 28, 1984. On March 31, 1984, as Ronald was strapped to a stretcher on wheels in the death chamber, his last words were, "What is about to transpire in a few moments is wrong. However, we as human beings do make mistakes and errors. This execution is one of those wrongs, but it does not mean the whole system of justice is wrong. Therefore, I forgive all, and I do mean all, those who have been involved in my death. If in any of my 39 years I have offended anyone, I hope they will forgive me as I forgave them. I also pray and ask God's forgiveness for all of us respectively as human beings. To my loved ones, I extend my undying love. To those close to me, know in your hearts I love you one and all. God bless you all, and may God's best blessings be always yours. Ronald C. O'Brien. P.S. During my time here, I have been treated well by all TDC personnel. Ronald was the third Texas inmate to be put to death by lethal injection and the second inmate that month. 10 minutes after the lethal injection, Ronald was pronounced dead at 12:48 a.m. A crowd of nearly 300 death penalty supporters gathered outside the prison and cheered after witnesses emerged while someone yelled "Trick or treat." There were also about 30 members of Amnesty International who opposed capital punishment. Ronald asked that his eyes be donated to the Lions Club Eye Bank. After his death, Deneen told the Houston Chronicle he made his bed, and now he is having to lie in it. I have no pity for him. Lisa Ann French was born on June 2, 1964 in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, to parents Alan French and Mary Ann Garrick. She lived in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin with her mother, stepfather Bruce DePaw, and newborn half-brother. On October 31, 1973, 9-year-old Lisa was excited to go trick-or-treating with her friend Ann Parker, but since Ann was grounded, Lisa went by herself. She left her home around 5:45 p.m. and stopped by a classmate's house and the house of one of her teachers before making her way to another neighbor's house, 24-year-old Gerald Turner, who lived a block away. Lisa's mother grew concerned when her daughter wasn't home by her 7 p.m. curfew. By 10 p.m., a search party was formed to look for Lisa. It was discovered that Lisa wasn't at a Halloween party that she planned on attending that night. A 4-day countywide search for Lisa was conducted, which included over 5,000 volunteers, 700 block parents, auxiliary police officers, the United States National Guard, and some of her fellow Girl Scouts. A farmer named Gerald Braun was returning home in his tractor on November 3, 1973 at 11:30 a.m. when he discovered 2 brown plastic bags behind a barbed wire fence near a forest on McCabe Road in Taysheta, Wisconsin. One containing Lisa's naked body and the other containing the clothing from her Halloween costume. An autopsy performed on Lisa had revealed that she died from asphyxiation, though a pathologist had also stated she died from circulatory shock from the sexual trauma that she endured. Lisa's funeral was held on November 6th. On November 8th, the Chamber of Commerce of Fond du Lac posted a $10,000 reward for the capture of Lisa's killer. Lisa's assault and murder shocked the community since nothing like that has happened before. Both children and adults were terrified, and there is even a debate on whether or not to continue trick-or-treating in Wisconsin. Lisa's Fond du Lac neighbor, Gerald Turner, was made a suspect of the murder early in the investigation by Fond du Lac law enforcement. During the 9 months of scrutiny from police, he was brought in by law enforcement to perform a polygraph exam. The results of the exam came back inconclusive, and Gerald refused to take a second one. Police collected body hair and bedspread fiber samples from Gerald, which positively matched the samples on Lisa's body and clothing. On August 8, 1974, Gerald confessed to the rape and murder of Lisa. At the time, Gerald lived with his girlfriend, Arlene Penn, and their infant child. Gerald and Lisa knew each other before when Gerald lived in the same duplex as Lisa's family before moving a block away. Lisa had spent time with her infant and had regular conversations with Gerald. According to Gerald's confession, Lisa rang his doorbell, said trick or treat, and walked through his open doorway with her candy bag open as Gerald came to the door. Gerald and Lisa began to talk about candy when he lured her into his bedroom where he sexually assaulted and murdered her. Gerald said that after the assault, Lisa wasn't breathing and he attempted to revive her, but was interrupted when Arlene came home at 7 p.m. from the party Lisa was going to attend. Gerald was wearing a bathrobe and told Arlene he was sick and made several trips to the bedroom to lie down. He confessed that Lisa's body was in the adjacent bathroom at the time. After Arlene left around 8 p.m. to visit her mother, Gerald took the 2 garbage bags to Tayshita to dispose of them. In effort to avoid leaving evidence of fingerprints on Lisa's body or the crime scene, Gerald wore socks on his hands when moving her body and wiped down Lisa's shoes and her parka zipper. Gerald was taken into custody on August 9, 1974, and convicted on February 4, 1975, by a jury on the charges of second-degree murder, enticing a child for immoral purposes, and acts of sexual perversion, and was sentenced to 38 years and 6 months in prison. Even with Gerald in custody, the city of Fond du Lac planned on canceling trick-or-treating in 1974 until radio party host Lula Beckman stepped in. She created a radio party on Halloween with a persona of the Pumpkin Lady. She gave kids a reason to listen on Halloween night, giving away prizes, including a trip to Disney World. Kids were motivated to come home before dark to listen to her show. Children filled out raffle tickets at school and had to be home when the Pumpkin Lady drew names on Halloween night in order to win. The idea was that kids wouldn't be out after dark, easing the community's fears around trick-or-treating. Gerald was first paroled on October 13, 1992 for good behavior after only serving 17 years and 8 months of his sentence. Gerald's 1992 parole sparked multiple community protests and public outrage among Lisa's relatives and residents of Milwaukee, where he was living in a halfway house during his first parole. This prompted lawmakers to create the Sexual Predator Law, Wisconsin Chapter 980, nicknamed Turner's Law, which was ratified on May 26, 1994 by Wisconsin Governor Tommy Thompson. This law allows criminals who have been paroled or released from their prison sentences to be detained in mental institutions if they are deemed sexually violent persons, dangerous to the public, and have a substantial probability of committing another crime. Gerald was sent back to prison on November 23, 1993, after a Department of Corrections appeal ruled that they had miscalculated his mandatory parole release from his good behavior. On January 29, 1998, after a 4-day trial, a jury on Gerald's parole hearing ruled that Gerald was a non-violent sexual predator, meaning that he could not be held at a treatment center under Turner's Law and could begin his mandatory second parole that year. In July 1998, a judge ruled against an unsuccessful attempt to revoke his parole after a June incident in which Gerald had shouted and waved a butcher knife at his caseworker while at his halfway home, and a psychiatrist ruled him to be a dangerous individual. Gerald had filed a complaint on the Waste Management of Madison when the company refused to hire him due to his criminal record. Gerald and the company reached an undisclosed settlement where they were required to hire Gerald due to a former Wisconsin law not allowing companies to consider criminal convictions when hiring former felons unless the crime is substantially related to the applying job, which the Waste Management Company argued that he could not be hired since they had 15 tours with children during the previous school year and he would have access to dangerous materials and chemicals. Following Gerald's complaint against the waste company, the Wisconsin State Assembly passed a bill on October 28, 1999, in a vote of 63 to 33, which repealed the original law that prohibited job discrimination based on a felon's criminal record, and employers could rightfully refuse to hire convicted felons without further complaints. Gerald was returned to prison for 15 additional years after violating his parole in 2003 when an abundance of pornographic content was discovered in his possession. Gerald, in an undated letter wrote to Lisa after her death, depicted the events that took place during their encounter. "I doubt that I could ever fully realize the terror you experienced at my hands. I can still see you standing in the doorway with that felt hat, beaming at having recognized me. Then I see the delight in your eyes turn to fear as I close the door behind you. The rest of my life I will have to live with what I did to you. On that night, I became a monster. I do swear to you, on the forfeiture of my life, I will never harm another child." Gerald had at one time suggested that due to committing the crimes on Halloween, he received more significance for the crime in his case, once quoting, "If it had happened on some other day, like Valentine's Day, nobody would have gave a damn." After returning to prison to serve 15 and a half years for violating his parole in 2003, Gerald was scheduled to be released from his extended prison sentence without any parole restrictions on February 1st, 2018. Gerald's impending release caused Lisa's mother to create an online petition in an effort to keep Gerald incarcerated in a mental treatment facility. As of 2021, the petition received over 34,000 signatures, with over 9,000 signatures from Wisconsin residents. The Wisconsin Department of Justice filed a legal petition on January 26, 2018, prior to his mandatory prison release, to make the case that Gerald should be detained under Wisconsin Chapter 980. After many continuances and denials over the years, Gerald remains in a high-security mental health facility with another court date on December 9th, 2024. To this day, Fond du Lac still schedules trick-or-treating during the daylight hours the weekend before Halloween. As of 2019, the City Council voted to always have trick-or-treating 3:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. on the last Saturday in October, even if Halloween is on a Sunday, to help prevent another horror like this from happening again. Marvin and Ethel Brandland from Fort Dodge, Iowa, were an elderly couple who enjoyed over 4 decades of marriage and owned a business together. 69-year-old Marvin also served in the military during World War II. On October 30th, 1982, the couple continued to hand out candy to trick-or-treaters when their granddaughter, Teresa Trueblood, left after visiting with her grandparents. Soon after Teresa left, an unusual man wearing a pillowcase with eye holes knocked on the door. Ethel opened the door and assumed the man wanted candy. He said, "Trick or treat, give me your money or I'll shoot." Ethel thought this was a prank and tried to remove the man's pillowcase. He clutched it and pulled it down. As Ethel went to get candy, the stranger followed her into the house and pulled a gun on her and Marvin. He demanded the couple to open a safe that was kept in the basement. No one knew of the safe except some family members. Marvin had no intention of going into the basement. He became tired of what he thought was a Halloween prank. After trying to grab the gun from the masked man, the robber pulled the trigger. A bullet struck Marvin in the throat. The shooter then ripped off the pillowcase, threw it down, and ran away. Marvin was rushed to the hospital where he died from his injuries on October 31st, 1982, while on the operating table. Ethel had lost the man she had loved for over 4 decades. The loneliness took its toll on her, and on Thanksgiving Day, Ethel broke down as she was surrounded by family. Her granddaughter Teresa said, "She was eating and then she couldn't eat, and she broke down and cried, and I'm never going to forget when they carried her out in the chair, and we always say she died of a broken heart because she didn't want to be by herself." Ethel passed away on July 20th, 1983. Teresa said she has regrets about what happened to her grandparents. After leaving her grandparents' home on that fateful day, she thought about returning immediately. She wanted to tell them not to answer the door after 7:30 p.m., and it still haunts her that she didn't go back to warn her grandparents. Fortunately, Ethel could describe the shooter. She said he stood about 5'8" with blonde hair and blue eyes. She estimated that he was somewhere between 16 and 20 years old. The family had claimed they know the killer's identity. He was a family acquaintance who had allegedly bragged about killing Marvin. Although the family had given the alleged shooter's name to the Fort Dodge police, they have arrested no one. In 2010, a crime lab analysis of the Pella case for DNA had no success. The family still hopes to get justice for Marvin and Ethel. After Marvin died, so did Ethel's will to live. Thank you, friends, for joining me today. If you enjoyed the stories on this episode, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to be alerted to all future content. If you have a story you would like me to read, feel free to email me your submission for a chance to hear your story on a future episode. Thank you again, friends, for your love and support. I'm Avarea, and until next time, take care.